There is no difference in the actual processing. There is no advantage in coming irregularly in how you are going to be processed. The same rules apply. The procedures in place are there to ensure that the rigor and the integrity of our immigration system holds, and I can understand the concerns that Canadians have about whether this is a shortcut, whether this is somehow uncontrolled immigration.
Prime Minister Trudeau today met with a task force to discuss the increase in asylum seekers coming into Canada. Conservative MP Michelle Rempel, she had a press conference today too, and she blamed Trudeau directly for the migrant crisis, in part because of his welcoming tweets. Welcome back to Power and Politics in the Power Panel, Ian, Supriya and Chad. I'm going to go to Chad first on this because I know he has things to say. What did you make of those comments in particular?
Prime Minister Trudeau today is factually incorrect, whether or not he intended to be. When you come to Canada through what we call a port of entry, like an airport or a border station when you drive up to the border, there are certain expectations. If you are an asylum seeker and you declare asylum, well, that application is only accepted if you already have a relative in Canada, or you aren't coming, you're landing from, let's say, an unsafe country, because we have an agreement called the Safe Third Country Agreement. These Haitian refugees are arriving from America by foot. They are crossing the border at a point, at a non-point of entry. They're just crossing in a place where there isn't a border hut, where you're not supposed to cross, and they're doing it intentionally. So their asylum claim must be heard, and Canada must receive them, immediately awarding them welfare, status, benefits, residences, and an appeal process that, in some cases, unless a new measure that was put in the Immigration Act in 2012 is invoked, years to appeal their current status to Canada. And the real cost isn't just the massive cost of an encampment and extra border guards and enforcement and receiving folks. It's that they are knocking more deserving asylum seekers who were trying to come here out of line, who obeyed a process, who maybe we were trying to resettle from a country in which they might otherwise not get health care or be killed for their political beliefs. Those folks are all now knocked down further in the line because these folks broke the rules.
Yeah, I mean, they are trying to speed up the processing time of these people coming in and to make sure that the backlog that was already in existence doesn't get further down. But
respectfully, it's not an issue of backlog. There are a fixed number of asylum and refugee spaces. They're taking spaces we had for other people who might be in greater need.
I think you're right. I mean, factually, when the Prime Minister says they are not getting different treatment, that's wrong, because they are, in fact, jumping the queue or jumping the line because of the way they're arriving.
There's a major difference of coming through a port of entry or not.
Yeah, Supriya,
They're not coming through a port of entry.
Yeah, but they add to the queue. They're not necessarily jumping the queue. They're simply just adding to the queue, and they're making it longer for what Chad referred to as actually people that may have a more legitimate claim, correct?
Or knocking them out of the line.
Or knocking them out of the line.
Some people who come here for asylum seekers, these are the refugees in the greatest need, who have the greatest degree of instability behind them. Getting a Christian family out of Syria right now might be such a priority that if we don't do it today, we can't do it in 3 months.
So I don't disagree with any of that. What I will say is that in terms of the way the government has reacted to this, that's exactly it. It's been a reactive measure. We've known for quite some time. I think that the first time both Quebec and Manitoba had seen issues of this was back in February. It was when it was extremely cold and people were crossing over. So obviously the warmer weather was going to bring this about. And I can appreciate the fact that they're sending an MP down of Haitian Canadian descent to Miami to speak to the community directly. But that's something that likely should have been done months ago in anticipation of this. And ultimately, the Prime Minister is right when he does say that Canadians do have the faith in the system and the system does work, but now we're going to be tested at our system. And Canada has enjoyed a lot of, patriotic joy simply because our system does work, and we do have a system that is arguably better than other countries, but that only lasts for as long as the system works and as long as people have faith in that system and they believe it works.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you're exactly right. That's why he was out there trying to talk about that today, because probably the worst consequence would be that this leads Canadians to doubt that the system does work, when really the system is the envy of many other countries. Ian.
It is in many regards, and in fact, the Canadian immigration system and the way we resettle refugees is also a stellar example, but there isn't enough in that system right now. What we're seeing, particularly from government-sponsored Syrian refugees, is they're not receiving the same level of support as some of the more privately sponsored refugees are. But I guess that's my other really big point here, is there's more than enough room for every single refugee who needs to get here. And I think that we need to be approaching this with a lot more empathy. As much as rules need to be followed, none of us have ever fled a war zone. You know, none of us know what it's like to be facing
Miami
Donald
is not
Trump's
a war
America,
zone.
where you're feeling like
for
you
all
can't.
for all the challenges
Okay,
of
Ian.
Miami.
Listen, let me be very.
Ian, okay,
Chad,
Ian, finish,
Chad,
and then
if I-
it'll be Chad. Go ahead, Ian.
I'm talking about the entire. I'm not talking about just the specific influx that we're seeing across the Quebec border. I'm talking about writ large how Canada accepts refugees. We need to do it better. We need to do it more proactively, and we need to increase those numbers by probably tens of thousands a year. We can, in Canada, accept 25,000 additional Syrian refugees in a year and a half, and private sponsors jumped up and were excited to do it. So I see absolutely no problem in actually going into the United States, going to Miami and saying, the lineup is actually here, not at the Quebec border. We'd like to have you in Canada because you are part of our economic resilience. You are part of the future of Canada. That's to me the reason and the way that we need to be going.
Except, Ian, let me push back on this. If 50% of those Haitian refugees, about 50%, are going to be rejected because they do not qualify to be refugees, why shouldn't those people just follow normal immigration processes? Why would we accept them as refugees when there are people in a more vulnerable position that will become that are legitimate refugees?
Because the other half of those are being accepted as refugees. And it's very difficult, I think, for an individual to come into the country and make that decision for themselves as to whether they're in the exact legal position to be considered a refugee. The vast majority of these people, of course, are not lawyers. They don't have, perhaps in many instances, the level of education that we would. So no, when you're fleeing an economically dire situation, a war, or any other situation in which you need help and you need a warm embrace, what we need more of here in the Canadian context is people not saying you're going to jump people out of the queue and this is a horrible thing, but rather let's put more into this system. So when I hear people like Michelle Rempel, for instance, just criticizing, what I'd actually like her to say is we need more investment.
Okay, Chad, you wanted to go.
These folks are coming from America. I feel very bad, but Haiti's been through worse crises, and these folks aren't fleeing Haiti on boats right now. They're coming up from Miami because they've been instructed to or have paid smugglers to help them and are illegally crossing into Canada, compromising the sovereignty of our border. Countries without borders are not countries. If you want to come to Canada, there are tons of ways to be an asylum seeker or refugee. We're one of the greatest
you have
nations
evidence
in the world
of human
for processing it.
No, we don't.
Well,
just to be clear,
Sorry, Chad, do you have evidence of human smuggling?
Just to be
How is it
clear,
only Haitians coming across in the same point? If there was a broader issue, wouldn't we have tens of thousands of people from hundreds of places coming across the broad border we have? This is a specific target.
So that's an assumption
Haitian
you're willing to make,
immigration.
is that it's illegal.
the public
The facts
safety
are pretty
minister, the
persuasive.
public safety minister said 2 days ago that they are looking at, although they haven't found evidence, they are looking at the possibility of human smuggling and falsified documents on these people. They have seen falsified documents, so
when
they're
thousands
looking
of
at it.
folks-
They're looking at it. Yeah.
When
Go ahead.
thousands of folks from one place come across the border in one place, I think we have a border problem. When they all choose to cross the border illegally to take advantage of the generosity of our asylum and refugee
Let's
system.
not demonize people, Chad. Come on, that's not fair either.
I'm going to demonize people
language
across
that
the
you're
border
using is
illegally
supposed to
because they
demonize.
came here illegally. There's lots of
They're
opportunities to
refugees.
come to Canada.
Never
and follow the
demonize a
rules.
refugee. That's a horrible thing to do.
I'm
mean, how could you
sorry.
possibly-
You are not a
They're-
refugee.
They're
if you do
asylum
not
why would
seekers.
you-
They're actually asylum seekers. They're not refugees yet.
Correct.
Yeah.
So if you seek asylum
Sure,
and you won't do it
asylum seeker,
legally
refugee, how could you
through a
possibly?
legal point of entry, you won't show any documentation, you are coming here illegally. That makes you an illegal
Okay,
immigrant.
Supriya.
But then our system
Supriya.
works, and then those people don't end up making the cut. Ultimately, you can't come over if you're just simply an economic migrant. We know this. That's part of the rules, and I think that was part of what the Prime Minister was trying to say, is that you have to have faith in the system, and I do think the system works. And if as many people are coming here simply because they've been told to do so, perhaps nefariously by human smugglers, then they'll get turned away.
Okay, I got to leave it there. That was a good debate, everybody. Thank you. Ian Capstick, Supriya Dwivedi, Chad Rogers. Thanks. Missed the show? You can catch up on our podcast. It's available every evening after I leave here at cbc.ca/podcasts. That's Power and Politics for this Wednesday. I'm Rosemary Barton. There's lots more still ahead on CBC News Network. Stay with us.